Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next awesome interview on this online summit. My name is Fatima Omar Khamissa. I am the spiritual and creative founder of Platinum Publishing and Million Stars Academy Coaching School, where we empower and equip women with templates and guides and step-by-step training for her to take her pain, her past, her skills, her wisdom, and turn it into power, purpose, and profits. You are invited to our special 5-day training in our Facebook group, the Tribe of Spiritual Entrepreneurs. We're conducting a training called Command Your Business Like a Queen, 5 days to achieving client attraction and breakthrough profits. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Ted Tsiakopoulos. He is an economist. He is an amazing father, a wonderful husband to a great wife. He is a member of the community. Ted is a highly sought after human being with 25 years of experience. This man has spent such an incredible amount of time on financial literacy. He worked as an investment counselor on Bay Street, and his analytical toolkit is huge. Okay, he has been featured in Money Magazine, on BBN, CTV, CBC, and he is a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. Ted is also on the board of directors of the Toronto Association for Business and Economics. He's a member of the Canadian Association for Business and Economics and a member of LAI, the Land Economics Association. So we are really, really, really lucky to have Ted here with us. Welcome to the call, Ted.
Thanks for having me, Fatima. It's great to be here.
You know,
and that's my son in the background, by the way.
Don't worry about it. Listen, this is being recorded during COVID-19 and the quarantine, and there's always going to be sounds in the background, and we're perfectly okay with all of that.
Okay, perfect.
So let's start out with, I just finished reading your bio. You and I met a couple of months ago. You're featured in the book Property Trendsetters, which is now a best-selling book. But I wanted to kind of, take us a little bit back, take us a little bit to your history and, give us a little bit of a journey. How did Ted Tsiakopoulos become the senior economist and the man that you are today? Because, you have this journey, then God opens a door, then closes a door, and then you're being moved in directions. How did you end up being who you are today?
Great question. I was a bit of an oddball growing up, and I realized that in my recent years. I grew up with family ties. I was an Alex P. Keaton fan. I knew at the age of 15 what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I just say thank you to the higher power upstairs for giving me the strength really to start planning well in advance of my career at a young age. And that's what my chapter is truly about. It's about starting young and thinking about these issues. Not to say don't live your life, but really, think about some of these issues. So you don't have to be an oddball like me to to start thinking about things at a younger age. So I fell in love with the area of economics at a very, very young age, and I've had a lot of support along the way. I've had great teachers who have inspired me to go on and study economics, finance. I remember a conversation I had with my mother at the dinner table one night, how she gave me a blunt lesson on how important it is to save and budget. And that truly kind of set me along the path of really wanting to help people build financial plans and really push me into a career on Bay Street. And then I realized one day that helping high net worth clients wasn't everything I wanted to do. I wanted to help the average Canadian as well, and that's when an opportunity opened up at CMHC, and we're all about helping Canadians meet their housing needs. And I jumped at that, and it's been a great journey. There's no dull day when it comes to the economy and housing.
Thank you so much. Ted, people know you and you are highly respected in the field. I have to tell you, when people have seen the book and they see your name on it, they're impressed because they know who you are. So it's a huge acknowledgement on your growth and your development and how you show up as a human being and as an economist. So if you don't already know that, you know, you are very deeply and widely respected by your peers and people in the industry.
Well,
And
thank
that
you. Thank you for saying
shows, of course, your journey and who you are, because you didn't just show up here yesterday.
No, I didn't. I didn't. And, you know, after our conversation that first night when we both met, the conversation was really about maybe too much focused on Ted and how can Ted build his network? How can Ted, you know, get his name out, sort of thing. And then when I went home that night, I realized very quickly that me being involved in this project wasn't about Ted. It was about them, the group that I'm talking about in the book, because that's what Ted Tsiakopoulos has been about for years, working with Junior Achievement of Canada, being in the classroom, helping kids understand the importance of financing, financial economics, building a financial plan, building a budget. So, yeah, you know, I've learned something about myself as well through this journey.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect segue into what was the motivation behind, like, what is that passion that drives you, that you devoted the chapter to the next generation? You're always talking about the next generation. You want to leave that legacy. You want to leave your wisdom behind. Tell us that motivation behind that.
So I'm a father. I'm also an uncle. And my son, I have a wonderful 11-year-old son. His development isn't where it needs to be. And, you know, my wife has just done a tremendous job. She's given up a senior level job to help him along the way. And, you know, I just kind of thought, what else can I do to help him? And even, you know, the broader younger generation that's going to be entering an important part of their life in the next decade. And I'd love nothing more than for my son to pick up the book, read my chapter from beginning to end, and you know, act on some of the strategies that I've highlighted in the chapter. You know, and if he was able to act on even just one, that would be a tremendous accomplishment for me. And yeah, so that's the first motivation. The second motivation, and I highlighted it a few seconds ago. You know, I was sitting at the dinner table with my mother one night, having dinner, and then all of a sudden, you know, I look over and my mother is scribbling something on a dinner napkin, and I asked her, and you know, I was 10 years old. I asked her, you know, what is it that you're scribbling on this dinner napkin? And she turned to me with stress in her eyes and said, well, you know, I want to make sure that the money coming in is enough to pay all of our expenses. And, you know, my parents were immigrants to Canada. They were not formally educated. They had no computer. They had no Excel. But yet my mother was sitting there and in a crude way engaging in financial planning. She was building a budget on a dinner napkin.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't motivate you, that sat with me for a number of years thereafter. And you know, if that doesn't motivate you to apply that in your own day-to-day life, I don't know what would. You know, and you know, as I said, my parents weren't educated that much, but they had the presence of mind to save for that rainy day. And if they can do it, my God, anybody can do it, I guess is my message in the chapter. And there's benefits of doing it. So early in life. So those were really the two motivating factors for me.
Absolutely. And that had an impact on 10-year-old Ted. I mean, that, right? 10-year-old Ted is looking at his mom scribbling this thing on the napkin. That had such an impact on you that here you are, senior economist, and highly sought after human being and helping other people. Like your mother is living through you.
Yeah, for sure. And I haven't yet shared the part of the chapter where I talk about her. I have mentioned to her that I have written a chapter, but at some point, once it's out, I will share the chapter with her. I think she'll probably be happy that she's been featured in there.
Of course.
But you know, in this day and age, not to provide that level of guidance to the next generation, given the alarming level of debt that we're seeing,
Yes.
is I considered myself a failure if I, given all of the work I have done in the area of financial literacy, I would have considered myself a failure if if I didn't make that type of contribution. Because, you know, Fatima, you've done tremendous things. I know about your story very, very well, which has inspired me to put pen and paper here as well. But at the end of the day, we're all going to be judged not on our titles, on the amount of money we're making, but more importantly, what difference did we make in the lives of people? And for me, that is a guiding principle.
So true. So what do you see now as the economy? There's all these things that are going on right now as we're recording this. There is a COVID-19 situation, there's a quarantine situation. And so by extension, the housing market, the economy, what is your prediction for the future, for the next decade? Tell us about your foresight.
Right. So, you know, we've just released the housing market outlook for the next 12 to 24 months. And as you can imagine, nobody has a crystal ball. We have highlighted a few scenarios that could play out. There's a high scenario, which is really an optimistic scenario. There's a low scenario, which is a pessimistic scenario. But there's this broad gap between the two, which really reflects the level of uncertainty out there. I'm going to look beyond the next 2 years, and that's what I've done in the chapter. I'm not really focusing on the next 2 years. I'm focusing on the next decade. And it's clear to me that the pace of economic growth over the next decade will be a lot softer, a lot slower than what we've seen in recent decades. And that means that job security is going to be challenged. It means that, you know, while we're doing so many great things, at least my current organization, in trying to promote affordability in the marketplace for all Canadians, there are some disruptions that are looming, and you know, again, preparing for those disruptions will mean the difference between success and failure. So it's going to be a challenging environment.
So let's segue onto that question. Does history repeat itself? Does history leave clues? And when you look at the other times in Canada, the recession, 9/11, 2008, do you see the same pattern emerging after this? Would you call it a recession? And tell us how you look at it from your perspective.
So from my personal perspective, you know, the two scenarios that we've developed actually link back to some of the periods that you've alluded to. So our high scenario, which is our optimistic scenario, really looks at the Great Recession that originated in the United States between 2008 and 2009. And we're suggesting that that is one scenario, that we come out of this fairly quickly. The recovery is fairly strong. It's a V-shaped recovery, and we move on. However, we also had this low scenario, pessimistic scenario, and that scenario looks nothing like 2008, 2009. In fact, it looks a lot like, if you recall, I'm not sure, Fatima, if you were in the country at the time, it looks a lot like the early 90s recession, which took a heck of a lot longer to come out of, to dig ourselves out of. So, you know, you know, those are just two scenarios. And where the truth lies could be somewhere in between, could be one of the two, you know, and so you know, that's the kind of uncertainty we live in now. And as I say, COVID-19 came at a time which I'm pinching myself in the sense that, is it really a blunt message that we need to start thinking about the unexpected moving forward?
Ted, if you had an opportunity to go back in time, and it was last November 2019, October 2019, what would you have done differently had you known that COVID-19 was going to strike and be this detrimental this quickly?
So, you know, I would be sharing some of my insights with as many people as I could. You know, it's an interesting question, Fatima, because if you've been following my blogs on LinkedIn, back in 2018, I was already sounding the alarm bells. There was some writing on the wall that suggested that a recession was imminent. And what would I do? What was I doing? I was paying down debt. And I'm happy to say that my wife and I are debt-free today. So the last thing I wanted is debt on my hands when this crisis, or whatever crisis was coming. I knew there was something coming. The economic data suggested something was coming. I wanted as little debt on my books as possible. I wanted a rainy fund, kind of a piggy bank, ready in case there was some disruption there that came from left field that you know, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. You think, so I made sure that we had some liquidity, right? My wife has been also very good at that. She's taught me a few things along the way, but you know, we made sure that we had some liquidity on hand. And you know, Fatima, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this was Ted and this was Ted's ability and this and that. I had a lot of help growing up, as I mentioned to you. There was a lot of, I had a supporting cast of teachers, of family who guided me along the way. And, you know, I just think it's time to give something back. And that's what the chapter is about.
I think it's really amazing because not only are you able to teach this information and leave this behind as a legacy, you also model that example, Ted. It's not like you're saying, hey, you go do this, but I'll do this. You actually paid off your debt. You created a rainy fund. So you're modeling that behavior. And there's a lot of people who write a lot of good things, but they don't actually model the behavior. So thank you for sharing that, because that actually makes a difference for the viewer and for the reader who's reading the book and watching the series. And so let's talk about, why is planning for the unexpected so important?
Yeah, so good question. You know, we do a great job as human beings at planning for the expected, right? That's the easy part. You know, so what is the expected? It really, these are events that have a higher probability of playing out, right? Coming to reality. We don't do as good of a job planning for the unexpected. And more importantly, we don't do a good enough job planning well in advance. You know, I cringe when I hear, you know, sometimes financial planners or economists say, you know, as long as you start doing this at the age of 25, 30, when, you know, when you're in school, in university years, you know, things will be okay. That is far, far too late. When I hear this 25 and 30 business, 30 years of age business, that is far too late to start putting a plan together, okay? I was told at a very young age, you need to start at the age of 15, if you can. And that's the message I'm sending, that we are headed into more turbulent waters in the next decade. If we've learned anything from COVID-19, it's that we need to plan for the unexpected. And how you do it and when you do it, well, that is really the focus of the chapter and the book more generally.
Yeah, I tell you, we don't know what's coming in the next 10 years. And I'm really glad that the next generation has your wisdom and your knowledge, Ted, and that you're generous enough to leave it behind. What do you think the challenges are going to be and the opportunities for the next generation?
So I just want to be upfront with you that um, these are certainly not exhaustive. I've only had about 4,000 words to write in the chapter, and certainly I didn't have the room to really get into everything that's on my mind. I've
And I'd like you
highlighted.
to I'd like you to expand not just what's in the chapter, but what's in your mind and what's in your heart.
So let's start with the 3D disruption. I call it the 3D disruption and planning for the 3D disruption to real estate. So the digital economy, this is a new industrial revolution we're in. The digital economy is going to disrupt the labor market in many ways. And um, I highlight what jobs will be disrupted. And I highlight how this new generation, this younger generation, Gen Z, needs to prepare for that. There is another disruption called debt, growing debt. So how do we get ourselves on the right side of debt? In other words, how do we manage that in a world of slower income growth, in a world where we're being pulled from different areas in terms of expenses that we need to take care of? So how do we manage that? And finally, the third D is demographics, aging demographics. The population is aging, and so what can realtors and builders do to help us along this journey? More importantly, what types of choices, housing options, can builders bring forward to help this next generation? Um, and and as you say, this is not an exhaustive list. On top of that, you can add a fourth D, which is deglobalization, and we have some real evidence that um, the world isn't becoming more integrated in terms of trade. We're being pulled apart. So whether it's Brexit, whether it's China-U.S. trade relations, those are just clues that we are increasingly moving into a more protectionist world. And for an economy like Toronto and Ontario that relies so heavily on trade, that's not great news. Yeah, we may attract more manufacturers back into Canada, into Ontario, but it's going to come at a cost. And that means consumer goods will likely be a little more expensive because we're not as efficient in producing everything. And secondly, it's going to come at a cost where growth won't be in and around 2 to 3%, but it's going to be well below 2% because we're not trading with a number of countries anymore. It's more of a protectionist world. We may be just trading with our southern neighbor, the United States. Um, so, how do we set ourselves up for these disruptions out there? And and I certainly don't, think that it's just on the shoulders of Generation Z. I think there is a supporting cast that needs to step up and help them along this journey.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for sharing those 3Ds or 4Ds that you suggested. Now, I want to go to the older generation. I want to just amplify the digital economy a little bit and the opportunities and challenges for the younger generation. And I want to just get your opinion about the older generation just for a hot minute right now. What are the people over 30, over 40, over 50 going to do as jobs are lost and the world goes online? What's your recommendation and advice for these people who may or may not even understand the digital economy?
Yeah. So I think that different generations are engaged in the digital economy in different ways. I think, one thing to really remember is that this next economy that we're headed into, or we're actually in right now, this digital economy, we'll need to upgrade our skills continuously to remain relevant. So task-oriented jobs, jobs that are routine, administrative, those are the ones that are most susceptible. And I have a lot of family members who are in those retail administrative roles, and I'm to this day I've been encouraging them for several years now to reconsider going back and retraining based on where this economy is going. So I think being having social and emotional intelligence will prevent you from being made obsolete by robotics and computers. They are not great at that. Mediators, consultants, they will have a real foothold in this new economy. And so, obviously, addressing and understanding those new skill sets that are required and getting the necessary training will be very, very critical for this this generation, for the older generation moving forward.
I have to agree with you 100%, Ted. I've noticed a huge influx in my coaching, training, certification programs with women turning towards entrepreneurship, coaching, consulting, and saying, I have been laid off, I don't know what to do, I know there's something different for me, and I want to be my own businesswoman, I want to do this. And I'm just like, where are all these people coming from? And it's exciting. And you're right, people who are creative, consultants, coaches, mediators, and that are not doing the same old menial tasks. There's a need for it. And these women are saying, I'm ready, this is the time, I don't mind investing, and show me how to do it.
Yeah, skills that can't be easily replicated by robotics, by a computer, are going to be skills that will remain resilient over the next decade. No question about it. And as I say, in the chapter, we highlight some of the skills, some of the jobs that are more susceptible versus others that are less susceptible. And I think that's part of the planning. But you raise a good point. Somebody in their 40s and 50s with a family may not have the same flexibility and freedom to go back to school. But there's all kinds of, here's how you leverage digital technology these days. You can take any course under the sun now.
I know.
Online, which is great. So there's been some positives that have come out of COVID-19, and I think keeping yourself relevant, whatever age you are in the future, is going to be very, very critical, for sure. And
maybe the question we should be asking ourselves is, can a robot do this? No? Okay, let me go and learn how to do this.
That's precisely what we highlight in the chapter.
Yeah.
And, as I say, this is a real call out and a real wake-up call, not just for older Canadians or younger Canadians. This is a wake-up call for what I call the other supporting cast that needs to step up as well. So educators, right? What does that curriculum need to look like moving forward to set this generation up for success? And so we need to really ask these very tough questions and make sure, and even parents will need to be far more engaged in their kids' education ahead and ensure that what they're being taught will be relevant for this new economy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so let's talk about the supporting cast. Let's talk about the roles of the uncles and the aunties and the educators and the politicians. How do we, and as parents, how do we support the next generation so the opportunities, the doors are open for them and we can ensure their success?
Okay, well, let's start with the parents. It could be just as simple as my interaction with my mother, who I call the CFO in the chapter. It could be as simple as, looking for those teaching opportunities at the dinner table, right? Or maybe it's not at the dinner table. It's, when you and your kids have some free time, there's always those teaching opportunities in terms of helping our kids understand that we need to be able to distinguish between a need and a want. We need to understand the value of a budget and the value of savings. And I think if you have those conversations with your kids at a very young age, sky's the limit. As I say, I'm not sure. I have to ask my mother whether it was intentional on her part, whether that lesson she gave me was that she knew what she had a motivation in mind when she said what she said at the time. But as I say, there's always a teaching opportunity for parents to really communicate the value of why a budget is important, why saving for a rainy day is important, and how to draw distinctions between needs and wants.
That's so important, Ted, and it's also about just having that example. And I can share a story with you. When the quarantine first started, and my children were in a little bit of a shock because they have an entire world outside of their home. They are in student council. My son was running for president. My daughter is very involved in York University. The other one just moved out and he's at U of T, and he is now got his bachelor's of arts in political science, but there won't be any walking across the stage for him. So my kids are very, very involved. And I remember right at the beginning, there was this level of fear and anxiety. And we were trying to talk about what was happening. Everybody was in shock. Everyone was confused. We'd never experienced anything like this. And I said, what's really going on? And when we finally got to the core of it, my son said, do we have enough money? And as interesting as that topic is, we come from a family, 10 years ago, I was running for my life. I was collecting a $535 welfare check. We were homeless. So my kids know what it's like not to have. They know what it's like for me to go to the dollar store and feed them from that. So I sat down and I said, thank you for your courage. Thank you for sharing this. Now we can address that. And I said, so how would you feel if I told you this, that I have put away in my savings, even if I don't get one single client or one single penny, we have enough money for 3 solid months of all expenses, anything that's needed, and a little bit more. And I just saw this relief come over them. And it was like, we're safe. And when you say that, are we going to teach them at the dinner table? Sometimes it's just a modeling of, this is what I've done, or talking about the fact that these are all our expenses. This is what's going out. This is what's coming in. How do we budget? Let's do this together as a team. What do you think about that idea?
Absolutely. I think that's a successful approach, modeling how we've handled certain situations. And, I provide a few examples of how I handled some of these situations growing up in the chapter. So, a wonderful idea for sure. And, I talk a little bit about the boomer generation in the chapter, who has been criticized for not living their lives. But clearly they've been through a lot of recessions, a lot of depressions. They've been through a war. And I'll tell you, they're wizards at knowing how to save for a rainy day. This isn't about using them as a role model and saying, hey, live your life the way the boomers did, make the kind of sacrifices. What I argue in the chapter is it's about striking a balance between saving and consumption. And if we're able to do that, as I say, that's going to be the difference between success and failure, the difference between someone who can come up with a down payment for rent or a down payment to own a home. But it needs to start early. There needs to be a supporting cast, and the onus isn't just on parents. Educators need to be part of this solution, making sure that the skills are there to make these students resilient in this new economy in the next decade. It's also a call out to realtors as well. I talk a little bit about realtors and what role they can play. And it's not just about selling a home and making a commission. And luckily, I've come across a lot of realtors who don't just care about those things. There are a lot of great realtors out there who add value. And what I argue is along with lenders, the realtors need to help that borrower understand what is a need and what is a want, right? There's a teaching moment there for realtors. Even if you think it's not your job, there is a teaching moment there for them when they're seeing their client engaged in a bidding war and they know full well, oh my goodness, this person is just blowing the budget on this thing. It's not good. There is a teachable moment there. And so I argue that there is an opportunity for realtors to make a difference. As well, builders are in a similar situation as well. So, as I say, it's not 1, 2, 3, it's a team effort here to help guide this next generation to success.
Wow. Ted, I could talk to you the whole day. I mean, you are such a wealth of knowledge, and I love your passion, your integrity, how authentic you are from the very, very first time I met you. I have so deep, deep respect for you, and thank you so much for your time in answering these questions. Congratulations on a great book and a fantastic chapter. It's a legacy you get to leave behind for your child and all the children, of Canadian families everywhere. So viewers, all of Ted's information is on this page. You can find him on all social media, his email. He would make such a great expert on your podcast, on your television show, on your radio show. Invite him over. He's a fantastic person with a wealth of information. And in the meantime, go to our Facebook group, the Tribe of Spiritual Entrepreneurs, and get hooked up there. There's a completely awesome training happening. Command your business like a queen, 5 days to achieving client attraction and breakthrough profits. Thank you again so much, Ted.
Thank you for the opportunity, Fatima.